You're listening to the weekly Parsha podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, 5777, 2016. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayera. The Torah tells us about the miraculous revelation, the miraculous birth of Yitzchak Avinu, of Isaac. His mother Sarah Imenu was 90 years old. She returned to the state of youth, was able to give birth, was able to even nurse her child. She became young again, as we spoke about previously. Avraham Avinu, Abraham, was 100 years old. He had also lost the ability, or it seemed had lost the ability to have children. And yet, these two old individuals had become young again and were able to conceive and have this beautiful child named Yitzchak, who his name, the very name itself, denotes the laughter, the joy, the amazing experience of a miracle of these people being able to have this child. Now, I want to read you a few verses, a few psukim, and I'd like to share with you a few midrashim that are really beautiful and amazing when we see the depth of what they're trying to say. This is in chapter 21, verse 5. Avraham b'ma'as shana b'valev loy es Yitzchak b'nai. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Verse 6. V'taimer Sarah said, Tzchak asali lakim kol shamea Yitzchak li. God made a great joke. Whoever will hear about this will laugh with me. Verse 7. V'taimer, and she said, Mi milel la'Avraham heinik avonim Sarah. Who could have believed that Abraham would have a child and that Sarah would be nursing that child? Ki aladiti venlis kunav, I gave birth to a child in his elder years. Verse 8, Vayigal hayeled vayigomal. The child grew up, and vayigomal, which literally means he was weaned, but we're going to see, very interesting, exactly at which point this is going to occur. Vayas Avraham mishteh gadol. Abraham made a great party, made a great celebration on the day that Isaac was weaned. Now, the central thing that I want to speak about is this party, is this weaning of Isaac, or exactly at which point this party was made. There's three different opinions. But before I share that medrash that speaks about it, I want to share with you a different medrash, two different midrashim that speak about the first part of the verses that we read. So the medrash says on the verse, on chapter 21, verse 6, that Sarah said that God made an amazing joke. And whoever's going to hear about it is going to laugh. Reb Berechia, Reb Yehuda, Reb Simon, B'Shem Shmuel, Reb Yitzchak. Reb Berechia, the son of Reb Yehuda, the son of Reb Simon, said in the name of Reb Shmuel, Reb Yitzchak, Ruvain b'simcha Shimon ma'ich baslei. If one person is joyous, calling him Ruvain, so what does Shimon care about that? Usually people don't partake in the joy of other people. Kach Sarah nifkida. So this is what happened. In order that other people should partake in the joy of Sarah Imenu, the fact that she was able to conceive. So Sarah, when she was able to conceive, what's going to cause them to care? Who else is going to care about that? At the time when the matriarch Sarah was able to conceive, many other women who were also unable to conceive previously were then miraculously able to conceive as well. Many people who were deaf became able to hear. Harbe sumim niftechu. Many people who were blind became able to see. Harbe shoitim nishtapu. Many people who were insane became sane. So this way, by the fact that so many miracles were happening at the same time, so many people were participating in the amazing, miraculous change that was going on for Sarah, it also occurred for other people, so that many other people would join in the joy that Sarah Imenu was experiencing. And then the Medrash tells us that this is not the only instance of this kind of experience. This is something that happened in the far future, many years after Sarah Imenu. Nemar Kanasiya, and there's a word here that we see is in both places, in both verses. In this regard, in regards to the psukim over here, the verse says, Tzchak asa li'elakim. God made a great laughing matter. So it uses the word asiya, uses the word asa, to make. In regards to Esther Hamalka, when she became the queen, so the king wanted to spread around the joy. He was so joyous. Achashverosh was very happy that he had this new queen named Esther. So he made an exemption from taxes, and it was to celebrate, so that all the people would be joyous and celebrate along with Achashverosh for finding his new queen. So just like in regards to the future time, we see that something joyous was happening, something good was happening on behalf of the Jewish people. From the fact that Esther was appointed the queen, a great salvation was going to come from that. The Jews would be saved in the story of Purim. And what was happening at the same time? There was something which was good. A good feeling was coming over all of the people at that time. So too over here, when he uses the word asa, which means to make, there's a making that's not just on behalf of one person, which is the Jewish people really at its essence, but the good thing that's occurring to the Jewish people is causing good things to happen all over the world with all of the people of the world. The Medrash finishes off with an amazing statement of Rabbi Levi Omar. Rabbi Levi says, Hosifu al ma'oris. At the time of this amazing miracle, when Yitzchak was born, so the ma'oros, the heavenly bodies, the sun and the moon, their light shone brighter. Nemar kan asiya asali. The verse here uses the word asiya, which means to make. Elsewhere, the verse refers to the fact that God made the two great luminaries, which is the sun and the moon. So it's saying that over here and over there there's a connection. And the connection, Rabbi Levi is saying, is that the sun and the moon themselves shone brighter as a result of this miracle that was going on. So as we read this Medrash, we need to understand what is the depth of what the Medrash is teaching us. What is the idea that just because Sarah Imenu, so she's going to have joy, we need everyone to have joy, and all the other people who couldn't conceive, all the other people who had any kind of problems, any physical issues, all of that was solved in order that they be involved and partake of the joy of Sarah Imenu. What is the depth of that idea? What is it teaching us? And what is it, how is it connected? What is the connection to the story of Esther and the fact that the Jewish people are about to experience the salvation? Why does it mean that everyone in the world has to experience some kind of good feeling and not have to pay taxes? And what is the connection between that and the fact that the sun and the moon are shining brighter? What is the idea behind that? I'd like to read to you the next piece in the Medrash, which goes on the fact that the verse refers to Sarah being manic, that she was nursing, but it doesn't say that she nursed her son. It said she nursed many sons. Hinika banim Sarah. It's very interesting. What's the idea? So Rashi actually gives us a short quote of the Medrash. I'm going to actually read Rashi. Rashi tells us, "Umahu banim lashon rabim." Why does it say it in a plural language? B'yom hamishte, on the day of this party, heviu asares b'neiam imayim. The princesses brought their children with them. Vehinika isam, and she went and she actually was nursing all of the children of the sarim of the princesses. Shehayu amris lo yolda Sarah. People said perhaps it wasn't Sarah that actually gave birth. Perhaps they brought this child from somewhere else, but in order to prove, as it were, that it was indeed Sarah who gave birth, so she wouldn't be able to nurse if she didn't have children. So from the fact that she was able to nurse, it was clear to everyone that she was the one who had given birth. Now, it's very interesting that the Eitz Yosef points out in explaining the Medrash, which Rashi is basically quoting, the Eitz Yosef says that why did they bring all their children to Sarah Imenu to be able to nurse them? The implication of the Medrash is that all of these princesses who had previously been able to nurse, Hashem made a miracle that they were unable to nurse, in order that they should have to bring their children to Sarah, who was the only one at the time who was able to nurse. If they wanted to have their children nursed, they would have no choice but to go to Sarah Imenu, who was the only one who was able to provide milk at that time. And the question is, what is the depth of this Medrash as well? What is the teaching? Why was it that, or what does it represent, that all of the Sarais, all of the princesses were unable to nurse? And why did they have to dafka specifically bring their children to Sarah Imenu? Why did she have to have so much milk, as the Medrash describes, that she was able to nurse all of these children? What is the depth of the Medrash? What is the depth of the idea that's being relayed by this Medrash? So I want to also just add on one more point from the Medrash itself, which Rashi doesn't bring, which also needs understanding. The end of the Medrash says that whoever brought their child l'shem shamayim, whoever brought their child for the right reasons to be nursed by Sarah Imenu, nasi yirei shamayim, that child ended up becoming someone who feared heaven, who was a good person, who was a God-fearing person, who was a spiritual person. However, anybody who didn't bring the child for the right reasons, so that child did end up getting memshala ba'olam hazeh. They did get power. Remember, these are princesses. Their children ended up with power in this world. They became rulers and leaders, those children, as a result of being nursed by Sarah Imenu. However, the Medrash finishes off by saying that those children who were not brought l'shem shamayim, who were not brought for the right reasons, for the right spiritual reasons, in the future time, when the Jewish people would receive the Torah, and all of the nations rejected the Torah, when God went around to all the nations, so they lost their power. They lost their rulership, meaning it was given to them, that power which they received from Sarah Imeinu was given to them for a short period of time, but it was lost when the Jews would return to the land of Israel. And of course we need to understand what is the idea that whoever was nursing for the right reasons, so then they became spiritually great, but even those who didn't nurse for the right reasons, they received power. What is the idea? What is the Medrash teaching us about the nursing capability of Sarah Imeinu? What was so special about that milk that she was nursing with? Which brings us to the final Medrash which I want to share with you today, which has to do with the amazing party, the amazing joyous party that Avraham Avinu made b'yom higomel es Yitzchak, on the day that Isaac was weaned. What is this a reference to? Which day was this a reference to? So, Rabbi Hoshaya Rabbah Omar, Rabbi Hoshaya Rabbah says, Nigmal mi'etz hara. What was he weaned from? The first understanding of the Medrash is that we're talking about the day of his bar mitzvah. We're talking about the day when he turned 13. When the Yetzer Tov, our sages say, the good inclination of a human being comes in at the age of 13. The day when he was weaned of only being self-centered, only self-focused, which is the idea of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that's how a child is until the age of 13. When a person hits 13, so the Yetzer Tov comes in. A person starts to notice other people. He starts to notice, what is my purpose in life? How can I be of service to others? That comes in at the age of 13. That's the Yom Higomel es Yitzchak, the day when he was weaned off of being purely self-centered. And the Yetzer Tov came in. That was the celebratory day that Avraham Avinu, that Abraham, made a party. That's one understanding. Rabbanan Amri Nigma Mechalavi. The sages say that it means the simple pshat. It means the simple understanding. It was the day that he was no longer going to be nursing from his mother. It was a day that he grew up. He was no longer a child. He was 3 years old already. He already had moved on from being that stage of being a baby. And it's very important to point out that the Rabbeinu Bachai mentions in explaining what was the chashivus, the significance of this time. He says that according to the Medrash, there's a Medrash that says that Avraham Avinu, Abraham, when was it, at what age did he come to an understanding or recognition of his Creator? It was at the age of 3. So when Yitzchak reached the age of 3, Abraham made an amazing party to celebrate the fact that now it was the time that he was going to enter into a new relationship with God. He was going to come to a certain recognition of God at that age. So that's the age, the time of 3 years old represents the time when he's coming into a new relationship with Hashem. There's also another opinion which is not brought in the Medrash, which is that B'yom Higomel es Yitzchak literally means the day of weaning, but you can take the word Higomel. The first 2 letters are He and Gimel. The gematria of them is 8. Together they equal 8. And the second half of the word is Mal, which means the Mila, the circumcision. That this party was celebrating the circumcision of Yitzchak Avinu at the age of 8 days old. So those are the 3 understandings, the 3 possibilities of at which point this party was made. Now the Medrash continues and talks about the party. Vayas Avraham mishte gadol. Abraham made an amazing party, a big party. What is this big party? Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Simon Omar, Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Simon says, Gedol olamim hayasham. What was big, what was great about the party was that the great one of the world, meaning God himself, he placed his divine presence there at that party. You came to that party and you had an amazing spiritual experience. Hashem himself was there, the great one. It was a mishte gadol. It was a great party. It was a spiritual party where the great one, God himself as it were, was at the party. Rabbi Yudin bar Masparta Amar, Rabbi Yudin bar Masparta says a different understanding, and he brings a verse also in regards to the party of Esther. Vayas hamelch mishte gadol. The verse tells us that when Achashverosh married Esther, he made a big party. What was the big party? What was big about it? Gedolei olam hayusham. The great ones, all of the great people of that time, those who had influence, those who had power, they all came to this party. And so how is that connected to us? It's the same thing by us. And there's a reference to the connection. Again, very interesting. There's a connection between the birth of Yitzchak and what happened in the time of Esther, the salvation that occurred in the time of Esther. Ado dichsiv, Medrash says that's what the verse is referring to when it says, Ki yashuv Hashem lasus alecha l'toiv, that Hashem will come back and he will rejoice over you in a positive way. This is a reference, as the Medrash, Bimei Mordechai ve'Esther, to the future time after the Torah was written, when Hashem is going to reveal himself and show that he's rejoicing with the Jewish people in the story of Esther. Kasher sasal avisecha, in the same way, the verse says, as God rejoiced over your forefathers, Bimei Avraham ve'Yitzchak, in the times of Abraham and Isaac. So we see there's two parts here. One part is that there's a connection between the times of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and the times of Esther Hamalka, the salvation that occurred to the Jewish people there. Very interesting. We need to understand that connection. The second part of it is that the great ones of that generation, the most influential people, were there. Medrash continues and talks about who was there. Who were those great people? Rabbi Yehuda Reb Simon says, Mishta Gadol, Mishta Gedolim. It's a reference to the fact that it was a party which the great ones of that generation, the great people of that generation came. There was a person named Og who will reappear in our Torah. We're going to read about him in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu Moses, that he's going to destroy Og Melech HaBashan, the king of Bashan. But Og, our sages tell us, our Chazal say, was alive and around in the times of Noach. He had grabbed onto the Teva. He survived by holding on to Noach's boat. But he was also there in the times of Abraham. Very interesting person. He lived a tremendously long life, and he was there throughout all of these times. Eventually, he'd be destroyed and killed, and all of his people and his kingship taken away from him by the Jewish people many hundreds of years later. So he and all of the other leaders of his generation had come to be at this party that Abraham made. Now, there was a conversation that went on there. Very interesting. Listen, Amr la'og. They said to Og, Og had been saying negative things about Abraham. He'd been spreading negative statements about him for whatever reason. After Abraham had his son Yishmael, which had been 14 years before this time, so Og was saying, look, Abraham is still married to Hagar, but they haven't had any more children. Abraham obviously can't have children anymore. He's unable to conceive. So he came to this party and people were saying, ha, look at you, look what you said. You said that he wasn't going to be able to have children, but here he has had children. Amar lahem. So Og responded and said, Achshav matanasai mahi lo shafufa. He said, what's the value of this gift? Meaning the child that he's given birth to is very weak. In yoiv ana itzboy ale ana pachisle. He said that if I wanted to, I could take my finger and squish him. Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God responded to Og and said, Mat mavaza matnasai. You're embarrassing him about the gift that he's received. This child, I swear, I promise, by your life, that you're going to see hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of his children. The end of you is going to be that you're going to fall in the hands of Yitzchak's children. This one that you say you could squish, his great-great-grandchildren are going to destroy you. Shenemar, as the verse says, God said to Moses, don't be afraid of him, in reference to Og. I've given him over into your hand. Now, I'm not going to go in and read the rest of the Medrash. We're running out of time, but I'll say it quickly outside. And the Medrash continues and says that who else was there besides for Og? The 31 kings that were going to come in the times of Yoshua. That Yoshua was going to come to Eretz Yisrael with the Jewish people, and they're going to destroy all of those 31 kings. So they were actually at this party as well, alongside Og. And the question we need to understand, the Pashup Shah question is, they lived 400 years, they lived another 450 years until the Jewish people came and destroyed them. Hard to understand. But what is the depth of what the Medrash is teaching us by telling us that they were there at that very party of Avraham Avinu? I think that if we step back and look in a broad way at what these Midrashim are telling us, we can see that there is a very deep concept which is being brought across by these Midrashim. And that idea is very clear in the statement of our Chazal that all of the women, all of the princesses were unable to nurse their children, and they had to bring their children to be nursed by Sarah Imenu. What is the depth of that teaching? I believe the depth of that teaching is that when there's a time where Hashem is showing an open miracle, an open salvation, a new stage in the birth of Klal Yisrael, so Hashem shows, He takes away power from all of the nations of the world in order to show that the Jewish people are the ones who are the source of the power, that all of the power comes through them. And from them it funnels into all of the other nations of the world, as we've spoken about previously. Now, that's going to be true on two different levels, the Medrash is teaching us. It's going to be true for those who come to get that power, who realize that the power, the source of the power, is really the Jewish people. It's Sarah Imenu. For those who recognize the Yanika, the sustenance, which is represented by her nursing, that sustenance comes from the Jewish people, those who recognize it and are interested in it, Nasirei Shamayim. They become people who fear heaven. They become people who are connected spiritually when they recognize that this is the source. Those who come because they have no choice, they still get power. The power does come from the Jewish people, even the power which is a fleeting power, which is the power over this world, which isn't the spiritual power. But it still comes, it still filters through the Jewish people, and it's received by them. It's power that they only have for a short time. It's only a few hundred years that they have that power. When the Jewish people are going to return to the land of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, they're going to take back that power. But the Medrash is teaching us that there's an acknowledgement here on the part of the nations of the world that the power really comes, the spiritual power and even the physical power really comes from the Jewish people. And that's not just something that occurred back at the time of Avraham Avinu, but the Medrash tells us it's something that's going to occur in the future as well. In the time of Esther Hamalka, when the Jewish people, again, it's going to be clear that the power that comes into the world, which is represented by the Malucha, by the kingship, that power really comes in through the Jewish people. Esther Hamalka represents the Jewish people. And there's a return of the Jewish people at that time to the land of Israel, representing the fact that the spiritual power comes in to the world through the Jewish people as well. The Medrash uses the concept of the fact that miracles happen. Amazing things, amazing changes happen. People are cured of their blindness, of their deafness, of their insanity. That happens how? Why? Because of a Sarah Imenu, because a miracle is happening to her. That miracle really just means that Hashem is openly showing that the source, the reason, the place where the miracles come into the world is through the Jewish people. And there's a recognition of that. That's the Yitzchak. It's not enough for Sarah Imenu and Avraham Avinu for them to have joy, for them to rejoice in the amazing spirituality that they're experiencing, the miracle that's occurring to them. No, it's something that has to be recognized by everybody throughout the entire world. That's the Medrash is teaching us. And that manifests in a spiritual way, it manifests in a physical way, in a miraculous physical way, and it also manifests, as we see in the time of Esther Hamalka, it manifests as people don't have to pay taxes. They feel happy, they get to keep what's theirs. Now we get to this party, and the party could be happening at 3 different places, and it could be it happened at all 3. But the party happens either on the day of Yitzchak Avinu, when he was gemalt, when he was circumcised, because that's an amazing spiritual concept, it's an amazing spiritual connection, fulfilling the will of God at that moment, recognizing the fact that all of our kochos, all of our abilities, even the ability to have children, our sexual ability is also to be dedicated to God. That's an amazing spiritual moment. Or it could be at the age of 3, when he's coming into a relationship, a recognition of godliness. Or it could be at the age of 13, when his Yetzer Tov comes in and the focus turns outwards. In any event, there's a party, a Mishteh Gadol, a great party, a great recognition that God is here. And indeed, God was there. But there's a recognition not just on the part of Avraham Avinu, but it's on the part of all of the leaders. The Medrash uses the concept of the leaders of the nations to represent that they are all coming to join that and recognize that it's Hashem, that the true source of their power really is from the power of Avraham Avinu, or the power of spirituality, the power of any of these 3 points in time that are significant in the life of Yitzchak Avinu. But even as they come, Og comes and he says, this is not really the power. Even as he's admitting he's coming to this party, he's still fighting it. The nations of the world, the powers of the nations, the leaders of the nations, they still fight, saying that the power is not really from spirituality. It doesn't really belong to the Jewish people. They are not really the conduit through which it's brought into the world. There's still a fight. But just like there's a period of time, this is how I thought about it, there's a period of time from the age of 0, Yitzchak is born, till the age of 13, when his Yetzer Tov comes in. There's 13 years when that Yetzer Hara is there, where that evil inclination is there. He's selfish, he's self-centered, he doesn't have that outlook yet. There's from the age of 0 to the age of 3, where he has not yet come to a recognition of godliness in the world. There's a time when things are dark, where the powers of evil have power. There's 450 years where Og and these 31 kings, they have power. But there are points in time where it's revealed that they don't really have power. There's a point in time when Avraham Avinu has this miraculous son, Yitzchak. This shows the amazing power of spirituality, of godliness, of the Jewish people. It's going to happen again It's going to happen in the time when the Jewish people return to the land of Israel and destroy the 31 kings, destroy Og. They lose their power. It happens again in the time of Esther, when it's shown that the Jewish people are the ones who are the source of the power, who God sends that power through. And it happens again in the future time when the Messiah arrives, when Mashiach comes, and it's shown clearly that the Jewish people all along have been the conduit through which spirituality comes into the world. Now, how does this apply to us? And I believe that this applies profoundly to us, because the truth is that there are many times in our lives, if we look carefully, we can see that there are points in time where Hashem has shown himself to be in our lives. And there are other times where it seems like the forces of evil are in charge. It seems like if I do something good, it doesn't necessarily have a positive effect. But Hashem wants us to look at those points. He wants us to see, look, we had an amazing miracle occur to us. We thought things were going to be a certain way, something bad was going to happen, and it turned around and good things happened. Or even within the negative experiences, we saw that Hashem was there with us. So we can see that just like on a very broad level, looking at the history of mankind, looking at the points in time when the Jewish people were shown to be that the spiritual is coming through them, and that there is spirituality in the world, and ultimately God is the one who's in charge. Just like there are points in time where that was clear and evident, as we spoke about in this medrash, it's also true on a personal level that Hashem shows us those things, each and every one of us, in our lives. And along comes the Og inside of us and says, no, this is not significant. No, this child is not amazing. No, this miracle is not a real miracle. And Hashem responds, and we need to respond to ourselves and say that that's not true. You will ultimately be destroyed. You, the Yetzer Hara, you, Og Melech HaBashim, will ultimately be destroyed by the great-great-grandchildren. We have no idea the power of the goodness in our lives, the spirituality that we draw into our lives. We don't realize it. We don't see it right away. But it builds and it builds and it builds. And just like the Jewish people started with one child, one miraculous child named Yitzchak, Isaac, and eventually they come into Eretz Yisrael 1.5 million people strong. So too we have to recognize and believe the power of the spirituality in our lives, the little things that we do, the connections that we make to Hashem, even though they don't look so powerful, they build and they build and they build. And eventually they have the power to overcome all of the difficulties and challenges that we face in our lives. So I want to bless you, and please bless me back. Hashem should help us to indeed notice those points, be able to see that, be able to recognize that in the history of the Jewish people and in our own personal histories. Hashem should help us to be able to recognize it and to use it in our lives as ammunition, so to speak, against the Yetzer Hara, against our evil inclination. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.